All right, we're back. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be with you. Appreciate the invite.
Yes, indeed. I believe you're in Kuala Lumpur at the moment.
I am in Kuala Lumpur. Just got back here about a week ago, and I got to. It's an interesting thing, this kind of New Year's in Asia, because you have so many things going on. You have Chinese New Year, and it's a really busy time. But it's great. It's nice to come back to the vibrance of Asia.
Absolutely. So is that where you typically start your year then?
This has been the one thing, I like to think that I figured a number of things in this whole nomad capitalist realm out. The thing that has a little bit eluded me is where do I spend my time? The answer is yes. I do start my year in Asia. It's nice to get a little bit of winter weather for New Year's. My wife, being Russian, she likes to celebrate New Year's back in that part of the world, and so we do that. And then we get our dose of winter and we get out. But I think Kuala Lumpur is a great place to be year-round also.
I agree with that. Well, this is going to be a fun episode. We haven't really touched on visas, international citizenships, but it gets a ton of chat in our online forum. So I know it's something that's of growing interest to so many people out there, as well as the international lifestyle, which has always been appealing to people, but is more and more easy and accessible nowadays. But one thing I noticed on Nomad Capitalist, your slogan is "Go where you're treated best." And so when you think of that, where are you currently treated best, Andrew? You're an American citizen living abroad. Where do you find that you're treated best?
Well, I gave up my U.S. citizenship in late 2017. I don't know that the United States is the best place. I mean, it's an interesting question on the United States. I met some guys in Vanuatu a couple of years ago who had renounced back in the 70s. And they said,
Wow.
I was still a U.S. citizen at the time. They said, you have the worst of both worlds. They said, you are a U.S. citizen who doesn't live there, yet you still have to deal with all the nonsense. And I said, you might be correct. However, I would think the one thing that's worse is you're a U.S. citizen who does live in the United States. And that's my personal lifestyle perspective. But, it's funny that in the course of when I was born 35 years ago, when the United States was ranked number one and by every metric in places to be born and what have you, to now, it's a dramatically different picture. There's so much more competition. And so the United States still kind of acts like the prom queen when there's so many other, cute girls. I think the interesting thing about Go Where You're Treated Best is it is all about cherry picking. Banking on a high level in Singapore, on a developing level in countries like Armenia, where I just did a 5.25% US dollar term deposit. I thought it was a pretty good place to park some dollars short term. Those are good places to bank. I think, for citizenship, I've chosen not to go down the route of what I call Tier A passports. I think you'll see more countries being aggressive with their citizens. I don't really want to get into, tons of rules and regulations and being tracked and monitored and everything. So I hold passports, a number of passports, not all of which I talk about, that I think, leave me alone. Investing. Cambodia has been very good to me. Georgia's been good to me, but becoming a little slower. Colombia is a new place where I think I can be treated best. So, to me, Go Where You're Treated Best is there's no one place. It's not a matter of picking up from point A and going to point B. It's a matter of looking at every piece of your life. And I've even started saying, dating, relationships, social life. These are all things where are you treated best? And it's not all going to be one place by any means.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of things to really take into consideration when you're thinking about the international lifestyle. And what was the initial decision when you gave up your U.S. citizenship in 2017?
Mm-hmm.
You're not an old guy. You got started with this stuff pretty early on, but that's a big decision. I know it's a decision a lot of people talk about. It's less of something that a lot of people, at least in my network, actually do. It's kind of on the back of their mind, but
Yep.
it's a big decision. But how did that come about for you?
Well, it's an emotional decision. I think this is the thing that nobody talks about, because I think you've got a lot of guys who are in interested in this stuff who are very analytical guys, and that's great, but there is another side. That's the human side. We are human beings. And it's very emotional, even for a guy like me who never felt like I had the identity, never really felt comfortable in the country, didn't really want to have the identity. There's a lot of personal things for me. I guess for a long time, I counsel people against making decisions out of anger. We had one guy come and say, I'm tired of funding the wars, and over the course of about a week, I talked him out of that, and I said, are there other reasons? Turns out there were, but I don't want someone just to renounce to protest the wars. I mean, that's not really productive. But for me, it was something that had built up over many years. I had the personal issues. I just never felt the total push, and I think what it was, and I'm sure I get some flack for this, but I'm pretty apolitical these days. But what I saw when I was sitting here in Kuala Lumpur, and I just put in an offer for the house I'm sitting in, and I went back to my hotel, and I was watching the Trump inauguration. And he's talking about how we're going to make America first. I said, you know what? Everything I've heard and everything I see, everything I know about the country and the people and all that, that means guys like me and guys like your audience are going to be in for some hurt. And Americans have already dealt with things like FATCA, this worldwide taxation, worldwide reporting. Now you have new things like guilty. There's, you have the FCPA. You've got so many rules and regulations. It's not just tax. It's so many rules and regulations and filings and you're worried you're going to fight. I mean, my last tax return was like a small town phone book, and you're worried you're going to mess up one thing and they're going to come and get you. And I just said, you know what? This is like the girlfriend that punches you in the face. And you worry that if you let her stick around, the next thing you know, you're going to be sleeping and she's going to slit your throat. I didn't want to wait around for the next move. And so I just think, if you want to live in the U.S., God bless you. Make America great and America first and all that. Fantastic. I don't live in the United States. And so I just felt like this was going to be something where life for expats was going to become much more difficult. And it turns out I was right.
What was the decision at that point? Were you already internationalized? Were you already living abroad when you decided to renounce your citizenship?
Yeah, so I've been kind of studying and kind of privately looking at this stuff. This is my 13th year. I've been pretty actively doing it. It's my 8th year. And I've been traveling for most of those 13 years. And so I'd left the U.S. full time, like late 2012, early 2013. So I think that was an important thing. When I talk to people who have come into some kind of sudden wealth and they want to renounce, but they've never lived outside of the U.S., it's difficult because it is emotional. It's very permanent, right? And so if you haven't been outside of the soup to know that it'll be okay, I think it's a nearly impossible decision for that person to make. But for me, in the 5 years before I did it, I had spent, I think, 6 days in the country, or something like that.
Now, when you renounce your citizenship, and I don't want to go too far into this rabbit hole, but I have heard a couple of horror stories where they renounced their citizenship and then they were basically denied access back into the U.S. to see, say, like a sick family member who couldn't travel, and that became a major point of regret. And the people that you've seen renounce citizenship in your own experience, after you renounce, has it been relatively easy to get back into the U.S. via a visa or another passport?
I don't think getting into the United, it's not one of those countries that's relatively easy to get into. What I will say is there's two categories. And I don't want to prognosticate too much, but for the people that we've seen who we've helped get passports through Ancestry, like UK, New Zealand, Canada, I think Austria was one of them. There's a handful that we've helped people get. They have what's called the visa waiver program, or in the case of Canada, they can just come. They've had zero problems at all, and I have friends who are Swiss and whatever, and they've also had no problems. Dutch, no problems. For people who get like a St. Kitts and Nevis passport and renounce, it's a bit more of a crapshoot. Again, I don't want to prognosticate. Here's the situation for everyone who's not entitled to visa-free access to the U.S. It's kind of like, are you going to draw the short straw or are you going to draw one of the normal straws? You're going to go for an interview and there's going to be 2 or 3 people there, and there's always somebody who's kind of nice and there's always someone who's not that nice. Uh, so it's a bit of a gamble. I think if you think that you're going to waltz in 100% no problems, this ain't the country to do it. So you've got to be prepared for that, have a plan. But I don't necessarily know that the majority of people are out there to get renunciants. I just think that if you've got a passport that is where they reject 40% of visa applicants, you might be one of the 40%.
Right. Now, you can't just renounce your citizenship without another citizenship, correct? You have to be a citizen somewhere. You have to have a passport. So I assume, or is that, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I would assume that you had another passport before you renounced your U.S. citizenship.
I know one or two people who have become stateless. The discussion that we have in our geek passport circles is what would happen if you renounced in a country with equal heft to the United States and you did become stateless, and then where would you go? Like if you renounced in China, would China call the U.S. and be like, listen, take this guy back because what are we don't want him here? Where would they deport you to, right? But you can become stateless. I mean, it's really kind of a case-by-case basis with the embassies. Some of the embassies are really strict. Some of them, I guess, are unpleasant. I've heard a couple of those stories. In my case, super nice, super professional. I have nothing bad to say about the people there. And they're like, hey, we'd like to know you're not going to be stateless. But I think it's case by case. And obviously I want to be respectful of our conversations that I had with them. But I think it's case by case. I don't think you'd want to be stateless, I think, is the more important answer. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.